Welcome back, everyone. I'm Bailey.
And I'm Raquel.
And this is the Whole Shebang podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Whole Shebang podcast. Today's episode is episode 42, and it's going to be a more Ricky-centered episode.
We're going to do a very, very, very brief overview of museum history, which is something I teach my students at the end of the year, usually in our general history course. And then I kind of throw in some Near Eastern stuff just because that's what I study, so it's kind of like what I know. But yeah, and then I also get to talk about the museums that I've experienced like work in or stuff I did during my undergrad, because I really like the Museum of Anthropology at UBC. And I will be tagging them in this video because they follow me on Instagram. So we're going to tag them away. Shall I share?
Yes, please share what you have.
This works. So if you're just listening and you want to see a more visual aid, this will be up on YouTube. Hi. Nice to see you. So I'm just going to share some slides because I'm a visual person, but that doesn't mean you can't just listen to it because I'm pretty sure half my students don't actually watch me when I teach this virtually anyway. So it's like...
Are you sure they listen to you?
No, definitely not. I can tell some of them don't because when I like put them in breakout rooms or I turn off and I'm like, bye everybody, they just stick around and they're just ghosts.
Okay, well, I will actually listen.
You can contribute too. I want this to be more informal because I don't want to just do all the talking.
Okay, well, if I have questions, I'll ask.
Yeah, cool. I like this. We should just call this Raquel Teaches Bailey New Things.
How to get a university education for free.
Okay, so let's talk about public history. This is what this comes out of, is a hour-long presentation where we talk about global history. What is global history? What is history? When do we consider history? All of these big questions. I'm not going to force us to get into that now because I'm pretty sure we've talked about that in one of our previous episodes from last year. But typically we consider history as the start of writing. Some people before then. Yeah. You have a question?
I remembered the episode where we were talking about history's origin or what is considered history. I do remember you mentioning that it was the form of writing, but isn't that civilizations? The start of civilizations, like there's different classifications?
I think that was the archaeology one where we watched Ancient Apocalypse.
It was the one where we were discussing Noah's Ark because they were talking about the floods.
Yes. So that was it. So the discipline of history typically starts with writing because we have other disciplines that cover before that. So like archaeology mostly, but there are other things. Some people would consider history at the start of the Big Bang, you know, some when civilization starts, but then the definition of civilization keeps changing, and like as it should, because it is rooted in some less than ideal beliefs from, the colonial era. And when we went around measuring people's heads to determine how smart they were. Yeah.
I would be very smart. I have a big head.
That doesn't mean your brain size fits.
I mean, if it's a flex, I'll go for it.
Yeah, okay. So museums start with cabinets of curiosity and collecting. So again, colonial era. This goes pretty much hand in hand with the Europeans looking to conquer new lands. You meet new people, you get new things. I'll talk about some of the things that these cabinets contained. If you're looking at this, there is a very interesting old image. It's a drawing of what one of these would have looked like. And the shelves are packed full of really random objects. And essentially, they would just collect anything and everything. It's a great form of looting also as well. You conquer a place, you loot all their valuable stuff, and then your wealthy benefactors get to keep it. Which is a really unfortunate history, but yet it still happens. So just for fun, because we talk about this in my class, some of the items that are commonly collected, we have preserved animals, taxidermy. This is sort of when the start of taxidermy comes out. Also not real animals, I think. We may have mentioned this, it might be our previous episode actually, when we talk about mermaids. We talk about like
Mhm.
the monkey fish, yeah. So all those kind of things, but horns and tusks, the biggest one being the narwhal horn is a unicorn horn, right? That's kind of where that conception comes out. Skeletons, we like human remains. Skulls are cool, pieces of skeletons are cool. Rocks and minerals, amethyst, emeralds, rubies, anything sparkly. Sparkly is good. We're like crows. Humans are like crows. Sculptures, Greek sculptures particularly, or Roman sculptures, but anything that, would be considered art. Clockwork, too, is often in these collections. Back then, clockwork was a lot more intricate and fancy than it is today.
We did end up getting in my car, but I understand why they would steal clockwork because I like all the internal mechanisms and what it looks like. It just looks super cool and sort of steampunkish, and I like that style.
Yeah, very much. Ethnographic specimens from exotic locations. So Canada also counts as an exotic location, FYI. So exotic.
So exotic. They can
But
take the snow.
back then, there was no white settlement, so it was considered exotic.
Mm.
And mythical creatures, again, mermaids, narwhals, dragon scales, dinosaur bones, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, unicorns. Yeah.
We love us a unicorn.
Unicorns are so very popular.
They are. So then, what do you do when you have all of this stuff? So you're talking hundreds of specimens. I mean, just look at my collection or your collection of things. What do you do with it all? Well, obviously, you build a giant building and you put all your stuff in it, and then you let all your rich, fancy friends come and check it out. And that is the origin of a museum.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very controversial, I would say. Like, to do that now would be horrifying. But even still today, there are full collections named after the people who donated the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think today, grave robbing is frowned upon, but you could get people, like, I could get people to come into my garage if I'm just like, hey, do you want to come and see Greg? And they're like, who's Greg? And I'm like, I don't know. This skeleton I pulled out of the ground last weekend. Do you want to come see him?
There was an amazing meme that I saw that was like, how many years before it's no longer grave robbing and you call it archaeology?
I think I saw that one too.
It's 100 years, by the way. 100 years.
Got to look for graves older than 100 years, and then I can call myself an archaeologist and open my own garage museum.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. I know what we're doing this summer. I got a couple of shovels. Let's go.
We are not doing that this summer. We are not admitting to crime on the podcast.
Yeah, we should edit that out. Premeditated and all that.
You're gonna have us like incarcerated for grave robbing.
We haven't done it yet.
Stop anything yet. This makes our yearly trips to the graveyard look really bad. Yeah, but it's 100 years because if you were like digging in your backyard and you found human remains, you would call the police and they would assess whether it's a archaeological find or a crime scene. And the difference is typically 100 years. So if it's within that 100 years, it's a crime scene. If it's later than the 100 years, then it's considered historic, and then it's archaeology. Yeah.
Such a fine line.
And if you don't report it, the fines can be pretty nasty, including jail time.
That's okay. I will get my $10 fee and I will be able to pay those fines.
What are you in for? Dug up some bodies.
No one would mess with you in jail. They're like, what do you mean you took up bodies? It's like,
Call
well, yeah.
yourself the Undertaker.
And maybe like the WWE Undertaker. I'm like, no, different kind. The actual kind.
So Bailey's gonna start a museum in her garage. Anyway, back to museums instead of grave robbing. We'll get there. There's more of that, I promise. Once these institutions start, like the British Museum, they eventually become open to the public. But this isn't just like something that happens overnight. So it does start as like a very elite thing. That's why I don't know if you ever get the air in some museums like the British Museum, we went there, where it's kind of almost snooty to walk around the museum. Like everyone's quiet, you're looking at the things and everyone's like wants to be well dressed, or you have the tourists, and there's just like a different vibe to that kind of place than to like a historic park.
Yeah.
And that's partially because of its history, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, smart move to capitalize on, hey, I got old stuff. I
Hey,
mean,
I funded this trip to colonize these people in America, and we took all their stuff, and now I have all their stuff and nowhere to put it, so I'm gonna build a big building and I'm gonna charge people to come look at it.
exactly. Capitalism at its finest.
Beautiful thing. Look, we're getting to the grave robbing, treasure hunting. So now you have these institutions. They have one or more collections from these wealthy benefactors. But now everybody has gone to see all the stuff already, and they're like, what do you do now? Well, you hire some guys to go to places with fancy, sparkly things like Egypt, and that is how archaeology starts.
Go find me pretty things.
Gold, even now, if you're in these places and you find gold, you have to hire extra security because that automatically is like a target for looting.
Oh, 100%.
I know you would. Stop admitting to crime, gee. I don't think we can air this. Egypt, one of the biggest targets. Then Mesopotamia, where my research is from. In Mesopotamia, it was a little bit less about trying to find the treasure and more to find the stories of the Bible, because it kind of like reaches into that area. So also like a lot of any Near Eastern archaeology comes out of biblical studies. And Egyptology too, because there's sites in Egypt that are related to the Bible. So very heavy on this, but also they're looking for fun things to put into the museum. And the museum pays these people. That's why they have a lot of collections. So that's how things like the Rosetta Stone end up in other institutions instead of in Egypt. Fun fact, because we're talking about grave robbing, the Victorians were obsessed with mummies, and they would throw mummy unwrapping parties. So you would get all your friends together as a party, and someone would sit there and unwrap the mummy, and mummies are covered in amulets and things. So every time there's a new amulet, one of the party guests would get it. Sometimes you'd draw lots or stuff, and you get to unwrap this dead person's body and get gold out of it. And then afterwards, they would sell off the bits of the mummy, so it became a medicine, but it also was a paint. They would crush human remains and paint their walls with it. And lead and arsenic. And they also used mummies in Egypt as fire fuel to run trains. So yeah, it's kind of morbid and unpleasant, but it's the way it is. 'Cause there's mummies all over Egypt. Like, we're not just talking the ones out of the pyramids, right? Like, that's a lot harder to get to. If you just
Yeah.
walk into the desert, there are graves everywhere. Because even poor people, the desert kind of mummifies your body, not quite as well as if you go through the whole mummification process, but it has like a natural preservation to it. So, yeah, dead remains everywhere. And this brings me to talking about Canada and colonialism a little bit. So I did my undergraduate at the University of British Columbia. It's a very, very beautiful campus. If you have a
Mhm.
chance, go. I think I dragged you to the Museum of Anthropology, didn't I?
You did actually, because the picture that is being shown of the totems,
Hmm.
we were in that area and I remember seeing them.
Yeah, they recently did some renovations on the museum, and they put in special plates and things underneath the museum for earthquake prevention. So if
Mm.
it starts shaking, not everything's going to shatter. Like that whole glass window would have come down on you. But yeah, so here's if you're looking at this, we have some images of totem poles and a mask from the Nuxalk Nation, which is in like northern British Columbia, northern western British Columbia. Some of these are obviously totem poles were prize objects to be sent back to Europe. That's how Europe ends up with a whole bunch of poles, but also they're all over Canada, they're everywhere. A little bit harder to move around than some of the things from the ancient Near East, but still a highly sought after object.
Mhm.
Which brings me to these two gentlemen. I've already talked about one of them on the podcast, but Franz Boas is one of the fathers of anthropology. So he studied the Northwest Coast people of Canada, and he did a lot of ethnographic research on them, which is really interesting. And he's a white guy studying Indigenous culture, the time of colonialism, so as good as he could have been. But a lot of his ethnographic research is what we still use to understand the Indigenous history, which is both useful but also a problem. But he was very interested in preserving the history, not so much erasing it. And he recorded a lot of the speak. So now the Nuxalk, which I'm bringing in because we worked with them in my undergrad, they have a radio station called Nuxalk Radio 1. I'm pretty sure it's still running. And they will play some of his recordings. And that's sort of how they've been revitalizing their language.
Okay.
It is really cool. So they do it on the radio, as they use radio as a means to revitalize language, the Nuxalk language. And it's really interesting because they'll have like segments where you just practice learning words, or they'll have a whole segment spoken in their language just to try to keep it up. They also have bingo nights, or they did. That was kind of fun. Yeah, it was really cool. So my undergrad class, a museum studies like curatorship course, we curated an exhibit on the radio station, and we had to interview all the people involved, and it was very interesting. I had a very lovely chat with one of the gentlemen who's helped start the radio. He reminded me so much of my uncle, like total bushman. I couldn't reach him because he was out hunting, and I had to contact his sister, who had to go and knock on his door and nag him to answer my phone calls. It was pretty great, but yeah, he was super nice, and we met a lot of them, and they're very nice people, and their station's really, really cool.
I'm definitely going to go check that out.
Such a clever way to start revitalizing your language, because in order to learn any language, you need to keep up with the practice.
Yeah. And not only that, but I know when I tried to study and would still like to study Japanese, a lot of it is audio to hear how the dialect is actually spoken, and it will help you pronounce it the way it was meant to. So listening to audiobooks or podcasts or radio stations in the language that you're looking to study is a great way to study it.
It's also because they're playing the historic recordings, they're literally listening to their great grandparents, their great great grandparents singing and speaking their language, which our country kind of forced out of them and did a whole bunch of really horrible things to prevent them from being able to practice those things. So I think it's a really great way to reclaim that.
Oh, 100%. I wish it was done for more of the Indigenous cultures around Canada.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And BC is a different situation to most of Canada. Not a lot of people actually know this, but in Canada, the Indigenous people signed treaties over for the land. And so, like in Ontario, a lot of our land is like treaty territory. In BC, none of the Indigenous groups signed treaties, which quite literally means that they never signed over the land, and the Canadian government is on land that they do not own at all, have ever owned. Which is why like we get news stories about like the pipeline and things like that. A lot of people know this, so they get angry about the things they see in the news, but the news kind of glosses over that even now. And once you actually know, because you live there, you find out very quickly, like, oh, I am quite literally not just on stolen land, but illegally stolen land. Like, there's nothing, there's no paperwork, there's nothing there. Like, it's still bad here. It's even worse there. But, like, even UBC is on Musqueam territory, so They try to incorporate the language a lot more. And there's a lot of, I've had professors, start lectures with discussing, doing land acknowledgements and things like that, which I don't
Mhm.
get here at all.
We have started at certain productions, like even at the college, they will do land acknowledgements now.
It's becoming more of a thing here now, but when I was in Vancouver, which was almost a decade ago, that was just common practice already.
I will say the town that we're from is very behind in the times. We're probably about 10 to 15 years behind. Yeah.
So it's a start. Anyway, we talked about Leonard Woolley before, but here he is looking dapper. He was an archaeologist in the ancient Near East in the early 1900s. We talked about the Royal Cemetery. I'm going to show the Royal Cemetery again because I'm obsessed with it, and Bailey's probably getting sick of it. But yeah, so I brought him in because he really starts scientific practice in archaeology, and he's funded by the British Museum and sometimes the University of Pennsylvania. Also, the University of Chicago has a lot of excavations going on at this time, but you can kind of get the idea, like they're doing these excavations for objects for the museum, which is not always ideal. But Leonard Woolley was very obsessed with the history. He loved it. And you can tell by the way he writes. He really wants people to understand the past, which is interesting, especially for his time period. Yeah, again, excavations at Ur. I love showing my students this because it's so dramatic. You have the Great Death Pit with over 70 skeletons in it, and they're all laid in a feast. You have things like harps and lyres and musical instruments coming out of the ground, which we don't get anywhere else. And of course, this is back in the day when archaeology was done with bulldozers, so they could get a lot further down than we typically do because we go layer by layer now. They just like
Yeah.
scoop right in. But he was pretty good about documenting everything. So this is one of the best excavations I would say from this time. It nowadays, an excavation of this size probably would take decades.
Yeah.
He did it in a couple years. But I mean, for what he did, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. I'd say. I mean, they did find a lot.
Yeah, and I have just some pictures of objects here. So the harps, they have game boards made out of stones and shells, and there's a YouTube video of Dr. Irving Finkel, who is the curator at the British Museum, teaching you how to play this game, which is kind of cool. So yeah, musical instruments, knives, we have ostrich eggs, we have little statues, they have bowls, everything is made out of gold, has lapis lazuli or shell. Like it's very, very extravagant. I also mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, but it was happening at the same time as Howard Carter finding Tutankhamun, and these are literally within months of each other, and they're competing for international news. And there's a lot of really fun headlines coming out of the world at this time because archaeology is really big right now. And these are two very big finds, and the one thing they both have in common, the gold. There's a
Yeah.
lot of gold. There's a lot of shiny. These are both big first discoveries, and that's why it really picks up, and archaeology picks up at this time. And then you get the World Wars, which slows things down, as you might imagine.
Just a little bit.
I mean, we could also go into Nazi looting history and talk about Nazis taking objects, but I avoid that in my class because I'm already throwing colonization at you. But I also am very passionate about looting, crimes in museums, archaeological sites. I'm a member of a group called the Looting Lab. We get together and talk about the frustrating aspects of dealing with looted cultural heritage, and it's really interesting. We have a lot of really good talks, but I like to bring this up to my students because I think it's something we don't really think about very often. Like you see it in movies, art heists and things. I just found another tablet. I was literally doing research for a presentation, and I found a tablet that had just been sold at auction for a couple $1,000. Who knows where that tablet came from?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's really upsetting. So locals will loot sites and museums to sell illegal art on the art market. We saw this happen a lot in Iraq and Syria with the wars. I mean, war is a great time to go and steal from your local museum. Not
Hmm.
that anyone should. Again, we're not we're not committing crimes. But yeah, so I have like a news article here which talks about the Iraq Museum trying to get their objects back. They have safely recovered. It's more now. This article's from 2018, so it's gone up, but they're still missing thousands of objects. And this was fun. This was an addition this year. I'm sure
Ah,
a lot of us have heard about the Louvre getting broken into and objects getting stolen from the Louvre. So that made big news. So I brought that up in my class, and yeah, we had a good chat about it because it's relevant, right? This is literally 2025.
yeah. I mean, when I heard about the Louvre, I had thought Ocean's 11 had came out of the movie screen, you know? And I didn't follow it. I read it and I was like, how could they steal things from the Louvre? And then they explained it. But did they ever get the jewels back? I never.
No,
Nope.
they're
So the
gone.
jewels are gone. Look for that on the black market.
Yeah, it won't be. So it's probably happened is they've gone to somebody who has ripped them apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really upsetting.
Because
But
they were Queen Victoria's, weren't they?
I don't think so. I think they belonged to a French queen. Yeah, Eugenie. So the jewels were taken. Some of them were dropped on their way out. They just went in through a window using a forklift. And then it really exposed a lot of issues with the Louvre security.
Yeah. Because if you can get in through a window on a forklift and then hop on a motorbike and ride away.
Yeah, and part of it is because it is the Louvre. And museums get stolen from all the time. All the time. The museum I worked at, where Bailey's from, we regularly had things that they'd say, go walking. And anything that was in accessible areas, you had to check because things do walk off. Even behind cases, if no one's watching and there's no video, take it and run.
I don't get it. I truly don't with the
Oh,
stealing
I
of
don't get it either.
history.
It's really upsetting. And like the things that were stolen while I was working there were not things that would get you any money. So we're talking like lighters from, 1950, maybe $100.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
But like I don't get it. But why do people steal from stores? Same thing. I don't remember what year this one was from, but recently, 2024, the British Museum had a curator steal a bunch of objects. Because when you work in a museum, you have pretty much free reign of the objects, and security is not great a lot of times. They've gotten better because of these things. So now, even when I go to the museums here, my bag is opted to be searched, and I have to sign in, and there's security guards everywhere, and I have to be escorted by someone who works there. But when the person who works there is selling the objects on eBay, you have a very serious issue, and that's what happened here. Was this curator was selling Greek, I believe it was Greek or Roman objects, and someone else who worked there said, "Huh, those are from our collection." And it became a huge investigation, and the director had to step down. So it's not just the people visiting the museums or looters during times of conflict, it is quite literally also the people who work there. And so, just some little facts here. In the 1900s, it's common for archaeologists to take from the sites that they were excavating. So, if I had an excavation and Bailey was coming to visit me, I would give her something as a souvenir and I wouldn't document it. And then 100 years later, Bailey's, say, grandchildren are going to donate that object to a museum. And then some poor researcher like me is going to be stuck with 500 objects that come from so and so's cupboard. Real useful, great provenance. A lot of these objects find their way into private collections or museums or auction houses. And there's kind of like this universal understanding that if it's been documented or like excavated after 1970, then it should have proper provenance. But if it's before that, you're free to do with it as you please. I don't
Mm,
like that. I don't like that. It should just all be a problem.
yeah.
But it's really hard to monitor, and these things, we're talking sometimes the small little tiny objects that are maybe a couple centimeters big. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, a clay tablet, which sells for a lot of money on the art market, is the size of your palm. It's very easy just to scoop up and walk away with. So that's part of the reason why our excavations are very heavily monitored now. You have to write everything down because this happens so much. And yeah, hey, my friend, here, take a souvenir. Now I don't know where it came from or what its purpose was, and it really removes a lot of the information I can get out of it.
Yeah.
But that's the unfortunate way things come to us. This one's a Canadian example that I brought up. So there was the Hudson's Bay Company, their like store kind of went out. Did you see anything about this, Bailey?
I did see that the Hudson's Bay Company sold, didn't
Mhm.
they?
Yes. So when they sold, they had this royal charter, which was one of the original from Britain giving them permission to sell from Canada. And it was placed on auction for $18 million. The last time I checked about this, several museums and institutions in Canada were pooling their money together to buy the object. I don't know what the result was. I'm hoping they did. But they actually, some museums took the Hudson's Bay to court over this because they said this is a piece of Canadian history that cannot be sold to a private collection. And
Yeah.
Hudson's Bay said, no, we can do with it as we please, it's ours, and the court approved them to sell it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The Hudson's Bay Company went bankrupt,
Mhm.
and that is why they had to sell. So, from a bankrupt point of view, it's let's sell this thing that could take care of our debts. But at the same time, you do wish that they would have given it to a museum because that is a pivotal piece of Canadian history.
I think part of the plan was to sell it to a museum, but $18 million for a Canadian museum, especially to buy something, that's not normal. Like, unless they have a really enthusiastic donor. Museums are non-for-profit organizations. They don't have a lot of money. Like, even the really big ones, they're pretty poor. So to pay 18 million for one object, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the outcome of this was. I mean, we can go look it up later. But yeah, this was happening in November 2025. A little interesting bit of current Canadian history that I like to bring up. And then I try to make sure my students are all completely discouraged about museums and collecting because it's not all bad. And there are new collecting processes. I am showing on the screen here a picture of the Museum of Anthropology website where they document everything. Go check it out. It's really cool. Very interactive. I love their website. It's probably my favorite museum website that I've seen. And I've been through all of them. But also, like, if I go and donate an object that I owned to a museum, that's not really controversial, right? It's just whatever, I'm donating it. And there are a lot of museums that have collections like that. And that's great, right? You know where it's from, you know what it did, you know its purpose. It's just when it starts to get into these sort of older collecting things, indigenous materials,
Mhm.
stuff that might not have been collected in the best way, where it becomes a problem. But not always. It's not always a problem. Sometimes, people donate things that they really care about that they want to see preserved. And that's
Yeah.
great. And also, objects come back. It's not very common. They did get some items repatriated from the Peabody Museum at Harvard, including, I think it was masks that they got back. But totem poles have been coming back. Ancestral remains considered different than objects, especially in the Americas. It's a different case in Europe. And it depends where the remains come from, because, they're not sending back Egyptian mummies.
Mhm.
Indigenous ancestral remains are more likely to make their way back, but not always. Sometimes there's a lot of problems with that too. Like the shrunken heads are a pretty good example of human remains that are requested back and they've had trouble getting it back. But we have seen some repatriation acts happening. It's becoming more popular now, which is great. It's not always the best case scenario, and I'm a very firm believer in repatriation. If someone wants their stuff back, give it back. But it's not always as easy as just giving it back. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of other things that go with it. If two different groups of people ask for something back and claim that it's theirs, now you have to figure out who it actually belongs to, and you might not be able to know for sure. So then you have a huge dispute going on, and this happens a lot too. Sometimes you have something that you want to give back, but you don't know where it belongs. That's another problem. Sometimes you want to give something back, but the people don't want it back. They don't have anywhere to put it. Nobody has any desire for it. Some museums, especially like the British Museum or the Louvre, who've been around a lot longer, they use preservatives back in, when they were collecting in the 1800s, 1900s, that are poisonous and toxic. And that causes problems. So you can't just send those back either. And sometimes repatriation is used in political agendas. So if I want this minority to vote for me, I'm going to get them their thing back, and now they're going to have to vote for me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not always a great thing, but in my mind, if somebody comes up to me and says, I want this object back, it's mine, and they can prove it's theirs, why are you not giving it back? The British Museum, Greece is asking for their marbles back. And then we use excuses like, we're a global museum and we can't send them back. Yeah, it's horrible. A lot of politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I've worked on repatriation attempts, but we didn't know where they belonged, so that didn't go very far. But doing the provenance research to try to figure out where they belong, that's what I really like doing and what I keep trying to apply for jobs in. So we'll see, maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
So yeah, that's my very, very brief overview of how archaeology and museums start, not in great context. A lot of colonialism, a lot of problems now, and grave robbing. Yeah, fun.
Well, I mean, when you add colonization into anything, it doesn't exactly turn out great. So, I also apologize. So that's going to wrap up today's episode on museums and archaeology.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask the teacher in the chat. I will answer you, though. So if you have questions, I will answer.
Yeah, she will. Drop us a comment on our videos, or if you're in Spotify, we have links on some way or some form to contact us, but she will answer your questions. So without further ado, cheers, guys. That's all for today. Catch us on Instagram, where we drop teasers for the next show, and our Discord account. Links are down below.